Good morning, Jason here. Hope you're having a fantastic day. It's time for your morning coffee, tea, or whatever you need to get your day started. Hey, today's episode's a little bit about the VA loan and some of the misinformation that's out there that we see all the time online. So sit back, relax, watch this video, take notes. Please, if it resonates with you, share it to all your friends, family, anybody that you know that could use that information. So, guys, have a great day. Here's time for your morning coffee.
The card won't be able to look at for another 6 months, but at least for now, you can get it
All right. So, hey, Jason here, North Realty Group. Michael DeBacker with the core team. Introduce yourself, Michael.
Hello, my name is Michael DeBacker. I'm a senior loan officer here at Core Team Mortgage.
So, Michael, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, where do I start? So I've been in mortgage lending now for 12 years in February, and actually it kind of is a bloodline here in my family. My father's been doing it for got to be close to 40 years now. He's definitely it's been a while for sure. So again, just been surrounded by mortgages. It's all I've kind of ever known in terms of a full-time career. And, you know, we do everything. I've done everything in terms of mortgage lending. So there really isn't much that surprises me this day. But you know, especially with what we're going to talk about here today, it's something I've done for a good 12 years.
Yeah. Sorry, I was low on the monitor there, so I don't look like this much head and this much everything else. So, but all right, cool. So your legacy lending, you know what I mean
Something
by
like that. Something
it's
like that.
bred into the bloodline, I guess. So.
That's
And
right.
if anybody doesn't know me or Michael, myself, Michael's dad was my very first manager in the mortgage business back in 2003. So, as far as my history with his family, it goes back quite a ways. So, and I've been using Michael exclusively as our lender for a year now, I guess, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so what I wanted to talk about is something that's kind of near and dear to me. I'm a veteran, 12 years, both Navy and Army. And obviously, I came from a lending background of about 13 years. I've been now on this side almost 4 years, actually, be 4 years in March. And it still blows my mind to this day. And that the fact that we're almost in 2020 and people, whether both consumer, but also realtors, uh, realtors, whatever y'all pick me, y'all want. I'm a Southern guy, I say realtors. But anyways, it baffles me that there's so much information out there that is completely inaccurate when it comes to mortgage lending. So I wanted to talk to you about today and get some of your thoughts on some of the things that you hear, some of the things that I hear as agents, how we can better ourselves to better serve our clients, both on the buyer and seller side, but mainly the end user, the consumer, that misinformation that's being put out there. I want to try to put some of that to rest. So here's one that I'll tell you real quick. So I'm in a couple of veteran groups, and someone asked, what's the minimum credit score? Resoundingly, everybody kept coming back and saying, well, the VA requires a 620. No, they require a 580. No, they require a 660. So let's just put this to the end right here. Michael, does the VA, not the lender, the VA require a minimum credit score?
No, it's what we call DU approval. So what that means is when we go through the pre-qualification process, we collect the income, the assets, we take a look at credit. We're going to send that file through the automated underwriting system that every lender has to use that subscribes to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. That system will either give us the green light or more or less the red light based on the profile we put in, but there's not a true minimum the VA requires. And that's probably going to lead to your next point, which is each lender does have what we call their overlays on top of whatever the VA guidelines are. So an overlay is basically a lender or a bank coming in saying, hey, we understand the VA says this, but we are a little bit more risk adverse. So we're going to say that the minimum credit score is 620 because that's all that we want to work with. That's all we feel comfortable with. And that's where the confusion comes in, is every lender does have a little bit of a different take on what their minimum credit score requirement would be. but the VA doesn't. They are saying, hey, it's just if you can get the loan done, you get the loan done, and we're good to go. My personal company that we work with, or that we're part of, is a 500 that we'll go down to. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds. There are some additional things generally needed when you go down to a 500 credit score, but at the end of the day, we have much more flexibility than most lenders you're going to be working with.
Gotcha. Okay, and now that makes total sense, and that's why I keep preface it with it's the VA requirement versus a lender requirement. You answered it perfectly. Is there are other lenders out there, mainly your banks. There are some mortgage, I say brokers, if that's what you really want to call them, that have all these overlays as well. But truly, a VA loan itself does not require a minimum credit score. It's just like Michael was saying. Michael, if I'm wrong, correct me. Is that it has to go through the system and it has to give an approved eligible, basically.
I'm always happy to correct you, but unfortunately that was 100% accurate.
Okay. And it's funny thing is people think, oh, well, I have a 660 credit score and I run it through a VA and it automatically says yes. That's not true either, right?
That's correct. So it's one of the misconceptions that sometimes it's hard for our vets to kind of wrap their mind around in the beginning, because what they've been told is that the VA will approve your loan because you're a vet. But it's not that simple. In fact, I had a story recently where a client went through my pre-qualification. Unfortunately, at that moment in time, he wasn't prepared to purchase a house, and that's okay. We still continue to work with him, but he then called VA, and VA said, no, you're eligible for, call it $400,000. So he calls me back. He's a little perturbed and frustrated. He says, Mike, I don't understand. You're telling me I can't qualify right now, when the VA is saying, no, I can get $400,000. Well, what the VA was really telling him is that he's eligible to get $400,000, but it doesn't mean he's approved to get it. So the VA allows you to do 100% financing, allows you to do 100% financing up to certain loan amounts based on your entitlement that you have available. But then you still have to go through the loan qualifying process, which is where we get into, again, the credit, the income, and the assets. So you still have to have a complete profile in terms of a standard mortgage, but it is the VA who just makes you eligible for that type of loan.
Gotcha. And actually, it's a good point you mentioned about eligibility and entitlement, though I wanted to talk about this a little bit later, but let's just kind of preface it now. I also see a lot of questions where people say, well, I can never use my VA loan again once I've already got a VA loan, or they have a house that is a VA loan that they're going to continue to have, and they want to buy a second home, but they're being told, no, you can't use a VA loan. But again, from my understanding, as long as you have eligibility and entitlement left, you could possibly qualify for a secondary home with a VA loan, correct?
Yeah, and there are some ins and outs to that. It's
Right.
not as simple as, if you own a house on 123 Main Street and you want to buy 124 Main Street next door, granted, live in it as your primary residence, that's not going to work.
Right.
If you were living in New York and you had a VA loan in New York and your job transferred you down to Texas here where we're at, there are circumstances where you can now carry 2 VA loans. What it again comes down to is the available entitlement you have remaining. And so you really won't, as a vet, know that going into the pre-qualification process on the second mortgage. So what we'll do is we'll get your certificate of eligibility. We will order, we'll order the COE, the certificate of eligibility. We'll see how much entitlement you have. We'll do a calculation, and based on that calculation, it will tell us how much you can do 100% financing up to. You can still get a VA loan regardless, whether you have an exorbitant amount of entitlement or a little less, but then it may just mean you need a down payment for the VA option.
Right.
So you can technically own multiple VAs. It just depends on, can you do 100% financing? If not, do you have the money to put down? Now, if you're going to sell a property that you have a VA loan on simultaneous with the time you're purchasing a new house using a VA loan, then generally that's not a problem. Sometimes it does take a little bit of time for that entitlement to get restored through the VA, but outside of that, no other issues involved with that.
And so what you're saying is you need to have a degree in master economics in order to calculate a VA eligibility. And I'm not joking.
It's not something we're not doing that on this video here today. I promise you that.
I've done it before, and I'm just still go, yeah. It's not it's not hard. It's not easy. It's just, it is a pretty in-depth mathematical calculation. So you definitely want to work with someone that understands that. Now,
And it's important to start that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's important to start that process as early as possible if you already have a VA loan, so we know what the next VA loan would look like for you. That's extremely important in that scenario.
Okay. And then you mentioned down payment. So I want to also clarify, a lot of people say, well, the loan limits, obviously we know they're going away as of January 1. You know, obviously you have to qualify, but in the past, a lot of people are like, oh no, you can't do more than X amount. Or if you do, you have to pay extra amount down. That's kind of going away though, correct?
Yeah, you're gonna have a lot more room for the 100% financing. So if you're looking at those higher price points, no problem. We aren't gonna have to struggle with the down payment the same way we used to. There was, again, a super mathematical formula that we had to use that if you exceeded X amount that you wanted to finance, then you might still have to come up with a down payment, but we just don't have to fuss with that the same way we were before.
Perfect. That's awesome. Now, what are some of the things that you see on your side that you hear, whether it's an agent or a consumer or some misinformation that you hear on your lending side more than I do?
Yeah, I'd say one big thing is every VA purchase needs a termite inspection. That's very important. So when you're doing the standard house inspection, go ahead and throw the termite inspection in there. I think that's usually, you kill two birds with one stone there, and it just simplifies the process. But it's something that a lot of our partners either don't know or don't remember. So on the lending side, it's our job, of course, to remind individuals. But it is very important that gets done because VA absolutely will require that. The other thing too, again, I cannot stress enough, start the process early because of that eligibility. We need to make sure that you are not getting too far down the road just to find out that the VA had some kind of issue with you using your entitlement. That unfortunately can happen if you don't prepare in advance. So we need to tackle that as early as possible. Other things too, I'll say that a lot of sellers or the seller's agents believe that a VA loan for our vets is going to cost the seller a lot more money. That used to be the case. There used to be a lot of fees that the buyer was not allowed to pay for, and technically there still are. However, things are adjusted accordingly. They've been set up and structured accordingly where that's no longer really a concern for anybody. So you as a seller are not really going to be penalized for selling your home to a vet. That should be the case. I mean, it's out of all the people buying a house, that is one of the people we should not have to penalize for that type of scenario.
Right.
So that's a big one for sure. Also too, depending on the branch of military you're in, it will change how long you had to be in that branch of military to be VA eligible. Yeah. So for instance, reserves and National Guard, it's a 6-year requirement before you're eligible for VA. So it even goes back to specify about Gulf War and Vietnam War and World War II and things like that. So I circle back to, that's why we want to figure out the entitlement thing as early as possible so we know if you're eligible.
And then on the entitlement, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times a service member, before they even start, can call the VA, log on to the system and get their certification pretty early on. And then that way, then, you know, ahead of time, yes, I am. Obviously, the lender's going to go back and order their own usually. Just, I hate to say double check and re-verify, but obviously I'm military.
It will happen. Yeah.
Double check and re-verify.
Right.
So is that something that they can do ahead of time just to kind of save the process? You know, not that they want to do my job or your job, but just kind of helps them understand, hey, I do understand that I am eligible. Here's what we have, you know, go from there.
Sure. Absolutely. Reach out to the VA and you can start that process on your own as well. No problem at all. Now, once you figure that out, that's still when you want to come over and try to get pre-qualified just to make sure, again, we've got your ducks in a row. And I mentioned earlier with the other client I was working with, it at that moment in time was not ready, but now we have him set up on a plan. We're going to continue working with him to build areas where he's deficient right now in terms of applying or getting approved for a loan. And so in the future, we'll be able to get him closed, him and his family, into a house, and all will be well.
Cool. I want to circle back to inspections. I was taking down some notes as you're talking there. So inspections, another one that I hear this all the time, and it drives me insane. And it doesn't matter whether it's in Texas, Washington, New York, it's always the same comments. And the scary thing is, I hear it from agents and loan officers, and it just baffles me. Inspections. Is there a such thing as a VA home inspection?
No, an inspection is an inspection.
Okay.
We just need a standard inspection coupled with a termite inspection.
Right.
The termite is the only difference on the inspection.
Right. And the reason I wanted to say a VA inspection is because there is a VA appraisal that has to be done by a certified VA appraiser, but the
That's correct.
inspection itself doesn't go to the VA. The inspection itself doesn't go to the lender. I want to go back to what you said about the WDI, wood destroying insects. That does have to go to you as a lender because it goes in the file
Correct.
to certify for VA eligibility, correct?
100% correct. So we want to separate out the inspection and the termite. Do them together, but then separate them out, because as a lender in any loan scenario, we prefer not to see the inspection, just because it now gives, quite frankly, the underwriter a lot more to look at, and it's not a requirement of the loan. We always highly recommend a client get an inspection, and I don't think there's a realtor out there would advise against our clients getting an inspection, but an inspection is different than the appraisal. We'll have someone inspect the property. That will happen on the appraisal. We don't want to also turn in the inspection and just give our underwriters more ammunition to kind of pick apart this property.
Right. And I go back to what you just said again. It's not required by the VA or the lender, obviously, but as a fiduciary responsibility to a buyer,
100%.
100%. If anybody ever has, and just so you guys know, if a lender or an agent tells you, oh, don't worry about it, you don't need a home inspection, run. Find a different lender, find a different agent.
Even new constructions have issues.
Yes.
Even new constructions have issues.
Yes. And not even to go into that, but I always recommend when you're doing any type of new construction home, whether, and by the way, guys, we'll cover this in a minute, VA does offer a 100% new construction loan, but I always recommend that you do what's called phase inspections. Even if it's a DR Horton, a Beazer, Shattuck, whoever it is, do a phase inspection. So as soon as the foundation and walls are up, inspector goes out, double checks everything, make sure everything looks good. Right before, when the wiring, HVAC, everything else is put in before drywall, they go out and inspect again. I mean, these are things that I recommend. Obviously, great lender like yourself, Michael, you'd recommend those as well. So again, I'm harping on this piece a little bit. Again, guys, a VA does not require an inspection. It is highly recommended. They only require the VA appraisal and the WDI. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, WDI is not national, it is regional, correct?
I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. I had assumed it was national. Apparently you're thinking it's not?
I know in some
And I only lend in Texas, so that's why I only know.
I know when I was a lender in Washington, we didn't require WDI because it was based on regional. I do know that as the climates have changed, I'm not going in a whole thing. We're all going to die because of climate. But I do know that some regions that previously didn't require are now requiring it, and some that did aren't. So I know that changes, but that's just from my experience. I think, guys, if you're not in Texas, which he and I are, we primarily only work in Texas, double check with your lender to make certain your region would or would not require WDI. Yeah. By the way, WDI.
And the lender you partner up with would know the answer to that question. The realtor should know the answer to that question, but the lender 100% will.
Let's talk about realtors for a second. I don't mean to pick on my own kind because I am one, right? But do you still see that?
I love all realtors, so I will not say anything negative.
Right. Well, I'm not being negative, and I'm not trying to be picking on anybody, but do you feel that they really do need to sit down with their lender? And I'm not saying understand how to structure it, how to do DTI, what to look for, not to look for, but understand the 1, 2, 3 ABCs of how a VA loan works. And any loan didn't matter that fact, but particularly a VA.
Yeah, I mean, I think almost every part of this industry has a responsibility to reach out to the other pieces of the transaction. That's appraisers, that's inspectors, that's realtors, underwriters, anybody who has their hands on the loan. I think it's important for all of us to have a grasp of what their role in the process is, so we can best advise our clients moving forward. Not to be an expert in every section of the loan or the real estate process, but to have an understanding. Now, really, to answer your question directly, yes, I think that's a great idea, and I think it's a lender's responsibility to reach out to their partners as well and make sure that they have a clear understanding of what's going on. So when we work in tandem with our clients who are looking to buy these houses, that we give them the best experience possible.
Gotcha. Okay. And then going back to what I mentioned earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, VA does offer a 100% home construction loan. And when I say
That's
this, we're not talking about DR Horton or a track home through a home builder. We're talking about a Gary Camp or like Coventry Build on Your Lots or Salcedo
Correct.
Homes. Like, so if they went to one of our subdivisions, like our Van Buren Estates, and they said, hey, I want to build a custom home, but they also need to buy the land at the same time, VA can put the land and the home package together as 100% finance. 100.
Correct.
Can't talk today. As 100%.
You got it.
Finance.
You got it. We understood.
But is that true? I mean, kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. How much time do you have?
Well, short
So
version.
yeah, I'll try to keep it simple as possible. But yes, I mean, it's not going to feel upfront that much different. I mean, you're going to negotiate a contract on a piece of land. We're already going to have financing essentially set up, and we're going to have a blueprint of what you're looking to do, and we'll set up the loan according to that. There will be money issued at certain periods of time. You won't get it all in one lump sum, or your contractor won't get it all in one lump. It'll come out in what we call draws. So that way, they can't just take the money and run with it. They actually have to do the work. They'll get a little more money, so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, once everything's done, you close, you're happy, and you move on.
Perfect. I'm trying to think. I mean, those are the main things that I always see. It costs a seller more money. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
You can't use UVA more than once. Well, yeah, actually you can. And in some instances, you can use it at the same time and concurrent. Inspections. What else? I mean, what else are you seeing out there? What about the misunderstanding? A lot of people think it's 100% financing. They don't have to put anything into it. I see that here and there, and I see agents tell. And again, I'm not trying to pick on other agents, but I do see agents telling people, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. You have to put any money into it." What?
Sure.
No.
So that's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I want to talk about. So this isn't to deter anybody, but it's best to understand, what you're potentially getting into. So there aren't those, you don't get that sticker shock the first time you're chatting with myself or another lender. Yes, VA is 100% financing. That means that you have zero down payment specifically. Any mortgage that you take out, though, there are other processes involved that have to be paid for. Appraisal. There's going to be a title. There's going to be title work done on the house to make sure that there's no liens against the title. There are many different things. We have to collect taxes and insurance, a portion of those at closing as well. We call that escrow. Those are dollar amounts that have to be accounted for one way or another. The immediate liability falls on the buyer. Now, there are certain things we can look at to get creative to help absorb some of those costs. But if you walk into this thinking you're going to have zero out of pocket, you're going to be a little bit surprised when we have our conversation. It's, between closing costs and escrow, you could be looking at anywhere between, depends on the price point you're interested in, depends on credit scores, things like that. But you could be sitting at $4,000 to $7,000 out of pocket outside of, the zero down payment that
Right.
VA allows. So now, again, we can get creative. There's things that we can try to look at to offset some of that, but just know going into it that if you don't have that, then we're going to have to kind of rely on a little bit of outside assistance.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think, like you were saying, I hate to use the word creative, but it does. It's working with a lender that understands how the process works front and back end, but also working with a buyer's agent that understands, okay, it's a VA loan, money may be tight. Well, let's negotiate closing costs. I think every buyer's agent should always try to negotiate closing costs for the seller. Now, saying that, I primarily am a listing agent. I only work on the listing side, but I understand the buyer side when they are asking for concessions, and that's something that a realtor can work with. So,
Of course.
stop going off. So,
Another thing I would bring up too is, the VA loan is much more flexible in terms of guidelines. We already talked about the credit portion, but the debt to income ratio, again, unlike the other loans, all the other loans have a specific number, a specific debt to income ratio that our clients are allowed to go up to. VA does not have that. Again, it just depends, do we get the approval in the underwriting system? So don't sell yourself short. Don't assume you cannot qualify until you talk to a mortgage professional, because you may be very surprised to hear that you actually do qualify despite maybe having a higher debt to income ratio or credit not being exactly where you hoped it to be. There are a lot of additional flexibilities built into this product. So And that's to reward our vets, to say thank you. You know, they set this program up as a way for you guys to have a leg up on qualifying, as you know, so well deserve. So
Yeah.
do not sell yourself short on these.
And I don't want to get on my soapbox, but a lot of people are like, oh, well, VA loans, you know, have you 100% financing, you don't have any skin in the game. VA historically has the lowest default rate of any loan program out there, from conventional,
Absolutely.
FHA, and so on. So for people to always say that, I'm like, guys, it's one of the lowest default rates, and the higher the credit score, that default rate dramatically drops off. Because a lot of people don't understand that if you're active military, reserve, guard, and you have a VA loan and you go in default, you get in a lot of trouble from your command. It's not it's just a slap on the wrist. It's a big deal when you're still in the service and you get behind on something like that.
Sure.
So, also, correct me if I'm wrong, but VA will allow, I hate to say down payment assistance because you're not really using a down payment assistance, but you can use funds from like T-Shack and some other, you know, nonprofits to go towards closing costs. So you could technically, quote unquote, come into a situation where you don't have as much money out of pocket. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's something, one of those outside options that we would look at, right, if it is needed. So what we do is once we pre-qualify you, once we understand what you have saved up currently, what your credit is, your debt to income ratio, all of those things, that's when we're going to really start to size up which option is best for you.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much covers all I wanted to kind of talk about it. The biggest thing is I just wanted to make certain that people understand that there's a lot of misinformation out there about VA, the lending process, the loans. And so that's why I want to get you on the horn instead of just hearing me talk about it. You know, get someone that does this on a daily basis and says, hey, we're seeing the same things, but pardon my French, it's just bullshit. It's misinformation that needs to be squashed, in my opinion. So anything else you want to cover?
And be careful what you read online. There's a lot of good information online, but there's also a lot of confusing and poor information. So the best thing, whether it's on the lending side, whether it's on the real estate side, is talk to a professional. Talking to someone is not going to cost you any money. It's just you're going to spend a little bit of time with them, but you're going to get a lot more direct information, a lot more correct information, at least one could hope and assume. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know, trying to diagnose yourself on WebMD. You're just going to scare yourself. You're just going to confuse yourself, and you're going to stop yourself from doing anything productive at that point because you think the world is ending. So talk to a professional as soon as possible if you are interested, and then we can, you know, kind of map things out to make sure we get you guys on the right path as soon as possible.
Yeah, and he ain't talking about the WebMD. One day I wasn't feeling well. I looked at my symptoms and I was dying of West Nile virus. So, you know.
I've had West Nile at least 14 times at this point.
Google can be your friend, and it can also be I'm about to die type of situation.
Sure.
Well, Michael, hey, buddy, I appreciate it. Hey, so everybody knows, Michael, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so you guys can find me on Facebook at The Mortgage Mike, all just common spelling, Mike short for Michael. Catch me on there, shoot me a message, and let me know how I can help you out.
Perfect. And then, guys, I will put his contact information, his personal cell phone, and his email on there. And I think you have a direct link as well to your site, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll see everything on there, a little bit of kind of background about me, client reviews rather. But he's not kidding about the cell phone, guys. Feel free to text or call. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'm happy to set up a phone call with you to see how I can best help you.
Cool, man. I appreciate your time. I'll talk to you later.
All right, guys.
Bye.